The clock is ticking. With President Donald Trump's August 1st deadline looming, trade negotiations between Canada and the United States have reached a fever pitch. The stakes are sky high. A sweeping 35% tariff on Canadian imports hangs over the talks like a storm cloud, formalized in writing and backed by Trump's unyielding resolve. For Canada, this isn't just a trade dispute, it's a defining moment, a test of economic resilience, diplomatic finesse, and national cohesion. Prime Minister Mark Carney, navigating his early days in office, faces a U.S. president who thrives on chaos, wielding tariffs as both a weapon and a political statement. Yet Canada is not backing down. Instead, it's playing a sophisticated game of leverage, discipline, and strategic diversification, with softwood lumber, potash, and liquefied natural gas, LNG, emerging as unexpected linchpins in a high-stakes chess match. At the heart of this standoff is a fundamental reality. Canada's economy is deeply intertwined with the United States. Nearly 97% of its oil and gas exports flow south, and countless industries, from autos to agriculture, rely on seamless cross-border trade. But Trump's trade strategy, a hallmark of his second term, is designed to destabilize. His approach, shifting deadlines, vague demands, and threats to renegotiate the U.S.-Mexico-Canada Agreement, USMCA, in 2026, creates what former New Brunswick Premier Brian Gallant aptly calls engineered confusion. It's a tactic meant to force other nations to react impulsively, to scramble under pressure. Canada, however, is refusing to take the bait. Under Carney's leadership, the response has been measured, coordinated, and quietly bold. Ottawa isn't matching Trump's bluster with chaos of its own. Instead, it's leaning on discipline, aligning federal and provincial priorities, and exploring options beyond the North American orbit. The softwood lumber dispute, a perennial thorn in Canada-US relations, has taken on new significance in this tense climate. For years, British Columbia's lumber industry has faced punitive U.S. duties, with over $7 billion in tariffs currently held in escrow. Historically, Canada resisted export quotas as a solution, viewing them as a concession too far. But with trade talks teetering on the edge, a shift is underway. British Columbia Premier David Eby, alongside other Canadian officials, is now signaling openness to quotas as part of a broader deal. This isn't a retreat, it's a calculated move. Softwood lumber is a sector with high visibility and deep cross-border interdependence, making it a rare opportunity for a quick win. Unlike dairy or autos, which are politically charged flashpoints, lumber carries enough weight to create leverage without igniting broader economic fallout. Why does softwood matter so much? For one, it's a lifeline for American construction. U.S. housing markets, particularly in regions like the Midwest and Northeast, depend heavily on Canadian lumber for high-quality, low-cost building materials. The duties already in place have driven up construction costs across the U.S., squeezing home builders and inflating prices for consumers. American lawmakers, feeling the heat from their constituents, are starting to push back. A bipartisan delegation of U.S. senators recently arrived in Ottawa, not to issue threats, but to seek stability. The longer this standoff drags on, the more pressure builds on both sides. For Canada, softwood isn't just a commodity, it's a bargaining chip, a way to signal flexibility without compromising core interests. By offering concessions on lumber, Canada could secure predictability in trade relations, even if some tariffs remain. It's a pragmatic play, one that reflects the Carney government's early knack for balancing principle with pragmatism. But Canada's strategy goes beyond lumber. Enter potash, the unassuming mineral that some are calling Canada's pink gold. Potash, a key ingredient in fertilizer, is vital to global food production. According to the Food and Agriculture Organization, over 50% of the world's food supply depends on fertilizers, and potash provides the potassium that makes them effective. Canada, with its vast reserves centered in Saskatchewan, is the world's leading producer. In 2023, the U.S. consumed over 5.3 million metric tons of potash, but produced only 400,000 tons domestically. The math is stark. America relies on Canada to bridge that gap, with Russia and Belarus, two other major suppliers, hamstrung by sanctions and instability. Canada stands as the only reliable source. This dependency gives Ottawa a unique kind of leverage, one that resonates far beyond industrial trade. Some Canadian leaders are urging Carney to wield potash as a strategic weapon. Elizabeth May, the Green Party MP from the Gulf Islands, has called for halting the $4.9 billion in potash exports to the U.S. entirely. Others propose creating a national strategic reserve. backed by public investment through bonds, an idea floated during the 2025 federal election and costed by Canada's Parliamentary Budget Office. The logic is straightforward. If Trump uses tariffs to inflict economic pain, Canada can respond in kind. Disrupting potash shipments would hit U.S. farmers, a key Trump constituency, hard, driving up fertilizer prices and by extension, food costs. It's a risky move, no doubt. Potash isn't just another industrial input, it's tied to food security and global supply chains. Any disruption could send shockwaves through North American agriculture and beyond. Yet the mere threat of action may be enough. The numbers, America's dependency, the market imbalance, speak louder than any ultimatum. By quietly signaling its willingness to play this card, Canada is forcing Washington to reconsider the cost of escalation. Energy, too, is emerging as a cornerstone of Canada's response. For decades, Canada's oil and gas sector has been tethered to the U.S. market, with American refineries buying nearly all of its exports. This reliance has often left Canada at a disadvantage, locking it into lower prices and limited market access. But the tides are shifting. In early July, Carney confirmed plans for a new east-west pipeline connecting Alberta's oil fields to the Pacific coast. This ambitious project would allow Canadian oil to bypass U.S. refineries entirely, opening up access to global markets. At the same time, LNG Canada, a $40 billion project in British Columbia, has begun shipping liquefied natural gas to North Asia. With a capacity of 14 million tons annually, and the potential to double, this marks a seismic shift. For the first time, Canada is positioning itself as a global energy player, not just a supplier to the U.S. This pivot is more than economic, it's geopolitical. Asia now accounts for over 70% of global LNG demand, with countries like Japan, South Korea, and China eager to transition from coal to cleaner natural gas. Canada's Pacific coastline gives it a critical edge. A tanker from British Columbia can reach Asia in half the time it takes from the U.S. Gulf Coast. This speed, coupled with Canada's vast reserves, positions it to compete and win in the global energy market. Former U.S. Energy Secretary Dan Brouillette has noted the political weight of this move. By diversifying its trade partners, Canada is reducing its vulnerability to U.S. tariffs and reshaping the power dynamic in North American energy. If Trump continues to push, Canada can redirect its supply to Asia, leaving U.S. refiners scrambling and consumers facing higher fuel prices. The implications are profound. The U.S. may be the world's top oil producer, pumping a record 13.4 million barrels per day in July 2025, according to the Energy Information Administration. But production is only half the equation. Delivery, through pipelines and infrastructure, remains a bottleneck. American refineries, particularly in the Midwest and Northeast, rely on stable Canadian imports to balance their needs. If Canada diverts its oil and gas to global markets, U.S. industries, from electric vehicles to heavy manufacturing, could face higher costs. Even more critically, Canada's LNG push could undercut America's own ambitions. While the Trump administration touts its Alaska LNG project, it's years behind schedule. By the time U.S. gas reaches Asia, Canadian cargo may already dominate the market. This isn't retaliation in the traditional sense. Canada isn't firing off angry tweets or issuing public ultimatums. Instead, it's building infrastructure, forging new trade relationships, and quietly reshaping the terms of engagement. The East-West pipeline and LNG exports are not just economic projects, they're statements of intent. They signal that Canada is no longer content to be boxed in by its southern neighbor. As Carney put it, this is about trade diversification and positioning Canada as an energy superpower. It's a long-term play, one that could fundamentally alter the balance of power in North America. At home, Canada is reinforcing its foundation. Bill C-5, aimed at breaking internal trade barriers, is fostering greater economic unity across provinces. The major projects. Bill prioritizes infrastructure, energy, and mining, with a focus on partnerships with Indigenous communities. Ontario is fiercely defending its auto sector, British Columbia is leveraging softwood lumber, and Quebec is pushing for time-bound clarity in trade talks. Despite their differences, Canada's premiers are presenting a united front, aligning with federal priorities in a way that's rare in the country's often fractious political landscape. Externally, Canada is broadening its horizons, strengthening ties with Mexico, the European Union, and G7 allies. The message is clear. Canada will not be held hostage by Washington's whims. Trump's tariffs were meant to corner Canada, to force concessions through economic pressure. But they may have backfired. The harder he pushes, the more Canada accelerates its pivot away from US dependency. Softwood lumber, potash, and LNG are not just commodities, they're symbols of Canada's growing self-reliance. The softwood dispute highlights its willingness to make strategic concessions without sacrificing sovereignty. Potash underscores its ability to wield economic leverage in a way that resonates globally. And LNG marks a bold step toward energy independence, one that could redefine Canada's role on the world stage. This is no ordinary trade war. It's a stress test of Canada's resolve, its ability to navigate a volatile global landscape while holding its ground. Trump thrives on confrontation, expecting others to blink. But Canada, under Carney's steady hand, is playing a different game, one rooted in discipline, foresight, and quiet strength. The August 1st deadline may bring tariffs, and the blowback will be felt on both sides of the border. American construction sites, congressional offices, and investor portfolios will bear the cost, just as Canadian industries will. But in the end, it may be Canada's measured approach, not Trump's volume, that shapes the outcome. Softwood, potash, and LNG are more than bargaining chips. They're proof that Canada can stand firm, adapt, and thrive no matter how loud the rhetoric gets.